I thought I understood the world. The rules were simple. Good looks get you ahead, kindness is a commodity, and attraction is about more than just chemistry, it's about who fits society's mold. I had everything figured out, or so I thought. I had the looks, the charm, the job, and the friends. Life was easy, predictable. Until one simple decision changed everything. A decision I thought would be harmless, helping a friend. But in the end, it revealed something about myself that I had been too blind to see. I was the kind of guy who fit into the social circles effortlessly. The office had a few men who carried a certain reputation, charming, good-looking, and always the center of attention. I was one of those men, the one everyone turned to when they needed advice, a joke, or just someone to lighten the mood. On the surface, life was good. I didn't really have to try. People saw what they wanted to see, and I let them. I was just another guy riding the wave of appearances. I had my usual friends, the ones who only cared about looks and status, the ones who saw beauty as something external. We'd laugh at the ugly ducklings in the office, always sneering at those who didn't meet our standard. I never thought much about it. It was just the way things were. I had never questioned it. Until Sarah.it all started with a simple favor from my friend Ben. He asked me to do something that seemed easy enough. Sarah, the quiet, awkward girl in the office, the one no one paid attention to, was having a rough time. She was always alone, always unnoticed. He told me, "Hey, man, you're good with people. Can you just go out with her? You know, so she doesn't feel so invisible?" At first, I thought it was a joke. Sarah was, well, let's just say she didn't exactly fit the mold. The office had its beauty standards, and Sarah didn't meet them. She was awkward, often dressed in loose, drab clothes, and rarely spoke. People whispered behind her back, labeling her unattractive, and it didn't help that she seemed to have no interest in changing her image, but Ben insisted. She was going through something, and he thought a date might help her come out of her shell. I wasn't thrilled about it. After all, why would anyone want to date someone like her? But Ben was a good friend, and I figured it would be a simple favor. It wasn't about me, it was about making her feel better. I could do that, right? So, I agreed. I told myself it was a small thing. A few hours of my time, that's all. It wasn't supposed to be anything more than that. Just a good deed, nothing to get worked up over. But I had no idea what I was stepping into. No idea that this small, seemingly insignificant decision would completely change the way I saw the world, and myself. I've always been the kind of guy who knew how to make an impression. At work, I had my charm dialed in. I was the one everyone turned to for advice, the one whose name was always brought up in casual conversations. I was a good-looking guy, always well-groomed, always confident, and that seemed to be enough to get by. Women smiled at me, men respected me, and my friends, well, they were mostly there because of how easy I was to be around. I didn't really think too deeply about anything, I just went with the flow, assuming that life would continue rewarding me for my looks and charm. There were a few people in the office who didn't seem to play by the same rules. Sarah was one of them. She was quiet, almost too quiet. You could see her in the corner of the room, hunched over her desk, trying to make herself as small as possible. She never spoke up during meetings, never joined the group chats, and certainly never attracted attention. The office had its own social order, and Sarah was on the bottom of the hierarchy. The others didn't even make an effort to get to know her. They didn't have to. To them, she was invisible. And I didn't think much of her either. Not until Ben asked me to step in. Ben and I had worked together for years. He was the kind of guy who was always looking out for others, maybe a little too much. He'd seen Sarah from a different angle, one where he recognized the loneliness that clouded her every movement. When he asked me to take her out on a date, my first thought was, why me? I didn't know Sarah that well, and the thought of spending time with her, especially considering her reputation, didn't excite me. She wasn't exactly what I'd call my type. But Ben pushed the point. "It's not about you, man," he said. "She's always alone. She doesn't deserve to be treated like this. Just give her a chance. It's only one date. You'll make her day, trust me." He seemed genuinely concerned, which made me feel like I had no choice but to agree. So, I did. I agreed to go on a date with Sarah, something I thought would be quick, painless, and not worth thinking about. I would do my good deed, check it off my list, and get back to my usual life. How hard could it be? I'd done charity work before, helping out people who were less fortunate than me, but this? It was nothing more than a small act of kindness. Or so I thought. At first, Sarah was exactly what I expected. She was shy, quiet, and awkward in her own skin. She barely looked me in the eye as we sat down at the cafe. The conversation was stilted, forced, and uncomfortable. I could feel the awkward tension hanging in the air. But the more I talked to her, the more I started noticing things I hadn't before. She wasn't just quiet, she was constantly overlooked. I watched as the waiter served everyone around us first, and when she tried to speak up, people barely acknowledged her presence. It wasn't just me noticing it, everyone seemed to dismiss her like she didn't even exist. I could tell it wasn't the first time it had happened, and that's when the guilt began to sink in. I started to feel bad. Bad for her. Bad for assuming she was someone I should only pity or pass by. There was something in her eyes, something hidden under the surface, that I hadn't expected to see. She wasn't just some invisible woman in the office. She had depth, a quiet strength that I didn't know how to process. As the night went on, I tried to shake off the growing discomfort in my chest. I told myself this was just a charity date. But the more I spent time with Sarah, the more I started to feel like I was seeing her in a way no one else had. And somewhere in the back of my mind, I wondered if there was more to her than I was willing to admit. At first, dating Sarah was just about helping her out, making her feel less invisible, less alone. But soon, I started to see things differently. She wasn't just the quiet, awkward girl I thought she was. She was kind, intelligent, and had this sense of humor that caught me off guard every time. It was like I'd been living my life in color, but with Sarah, everything suddenly felt more vivid. She made me laugh in ways I hadn't in years, and I found myself looking forward to our conversations, craving the simple moments I spent with her. I didn't expect it to feel this way, but somewhere along the line, I realized that I didn't just enjoy her company, I started to genuinely care about her. One evening, as we sat together in a park after dinner, Sarah did something she hadn't done before. She opened up. I'd known she had her struggles, but this was different. She started talking about her past, her reasons for being so withdrawn, and it hit me like a punch in the stomach. She told me how she had been rejected by nearly everyone in her life, from her family to ex-boyfriends, all because of her appearance. It wasn't just the cruel comments or the looks from strangers, it was the isolation that followed. She explained how people would look at her like she was invisible, how they would make assumptions about who she was without even bothering to get to know her. The rejection had left deep scars on her heart. Her voice trembled as she talked about the years she spent hiding from the world, convinced that no one would ever love her for who she truly was. It was the kind of pain I couldn't even begin to understand. And yet, here she was, strong, self-assured, and somehow still able to laugh. I was torn. On one hand, I was amazed by her resilience. On the other hand, the world's shallow judgment of her still lingered in my mind. I found myself falling for Sarah in ways I hadn't expected. Her heart, her soul, they were so beautiful, so deep. But my mind still wrestled with the image of her I had been taught to see, the one that everyone else seemed to have. I couldn't help but question if I was just falling for her out of pity, or if there was something real there. The breaking point came a few days later. I was hanging out with my usual group of friends when I overheard them talking about Sarah. The words hit me like a slap to the face. They were mocking her, laughing at the way she looked, calling her unworthy of someone like me. They didn't get it. they didn't understand why I'd chosen to be with her. And in that moment, everything changed. I stood there, frozen, listening to them tear her apart. The worst part? I realized that I had been complicit in it all along. I had been part of the crowd that dismissed her. I had judged her based on appearances just like everyone else. My friends were right about one thing: I had chosen her, but not because I was above the judgment. I was just like them. The guilt washed over me like a flood. I had thought I was doing something noble, but in reality, I had been playing into the very system that had hurt Sarah for so long. The woman I was falling for, the one I admired for her strength, was the same person I had once turned my back on. The realization was a punch to the gut. It was the moment that made me question everything. The days after overhearing my friend's cruel words were a blur. My mind was in a constant state of turmoil, replaying the conversation over and over again. I couldn't shake the guilt. The shame of realizing how I had been just like everyone else, judging Sarah based on her appearance, haunted me. I had believed I was different. I had convinced myself that I wasn't like the people who ignored her, mocked her, and treated her like she was invisible. But I had been the worst kind of hypocrite. As the days passed, I found myself pulling away from Sarah. It wasn't that I didn't care about her anymore, far from it. But I couldn't ignore the pressure mounting inside me. The more I spent time with her, the more I began to fear the consequences. She was beautiful, kind, intelligent, everything I had ever wanted in a partner, but society had labeled her ugly, and I had started to believe those labels, too. What would happen to my social standing if people found out I was dating her? What would my friends say? I couldn't bear the thought of losing everything I had worked for, the respect, the admiration, the life I had built based on appearances. I tried to justify it. I told myself it was for the best. That it was easier to let go now, before it got too serious. But with every word I spoke to her, I felt the distance grow between us. She noticed it, of course. Sarah, despite her quiet nature, wasn't blind to the shift. She could see the change in me. She could feel the walls I was putting up. And as much as it broke her heart, she didn't fight it. One evening, after a particularly cold conversation, Sarah looked at me with a pain in her eyes I'll never forget. "Maybe it's time for us to go our separate ways," she said softly, her voice trembling. The words cut through me like a blade. She was stepping away, not because she wanted to, but because she had to protect herself. She had already endured enough rejection in her life, and now, the one person she had started to trust, the one person she thought might care, was doing the same thing everyone else had done to her. I begged her to stay, to talk things through, but she was resolute. And just like that, the woman who had begun to change my life, who had begun to make me see the world through different eyes, was slipping away. I had pushed her to this point, and now I had no one to blame but myself. It wasn't until she walked out of my life that I realized the truth. I had just let go of the one person who could truly make me a better man. And it was too late to fix it. Weeks passed. Then months. Life went back to its usual rhythm, but I didn't. Everything felt muted, like the colors of my world had faded. I stopped attending office parties, avoided the people I once called friends, and spent a lot of time alone with my thoughts. I scrolled past pictures of Sarah on social media, only to find none. She had deleted everything. Vanished, but her absence made one thing painfully clear: I had never been happy with the women I dated before her. The models, the influencers, the so-called trophies, they were empty connections. What I had with Sarah had been real. And I threw it away. Then, out of nowhere, her name started popping up in headlines. Mystery woman behind tech startup revealed. The billionaire CEO who was hiding in plain sight. From office nobody to industry queen pin, meet Sarah Hayes. I thought it was a coincidence at first. But the photo stopped me cold. It was her. Sarah, only now, she was standing on a stage, dressed in sleek black, her hair cascading in soft waves, confidence radiating from her like a halo. The article explained everything. Sarah Hayes, yes, Hayes, the same name as one of the largest venture capital firms in the state, wasn't just a random office worker. She was the daughter of Gregory Hayes, a tycoon who had passed down his empire to her quietly. Rather than announce herself, she had chosen to work among people anonymously, observing how they treated someone they deemed beneath them. My heart dropped. I remembered all the times people ignored her, laughed at her, whispered behind her back, including me. And she had seen it all. Felt it all. Carried it with her. But she never reacted. She had never been weak or broken. She had been strong enough to endure cruelty without showing an ounce of bitterness. She was never hiding in the shadows because she was ashamed. She was watching. Measuring. Waiting. I wasn't just a failed boyfriend. I was a failed test. I wasn't sure what hurt more, that I had lost her, or that I never really knew her to begin with. I sat there, watching her speak at a business conference on my laptop, her voice strong and elegant. She didn't mention me. She didn't have to. I had become just another story in her past. Another man who couldn't see what was right in front of him. In that moment, I realized the truth. I didn't lose Sarah because of how she looked. I lost her because of how I looked at her. I often think back to that moment, the first time I sat across from Sarah at that coffee shop, awkwardly stirring my drink, thinking I was doing her a favor. How arrogant I was. How blind. Back then, I thought I had everything figured out: charm, looks, popularity, a well-paying job. I thought success was measured by how many people envied your life, how many heads turned when you entered a room. I didn't realize I was chasing shadows, illusions. Sarah shattered all of that. She didn't yell. She didn't punish me. She just quietly walked away, and in doing so, she left the loudest echo in my soul. She taught me that beauty isn't loud. It doesn't always wear makeup, or designer clothes, or smile at the right time. Real beauty is resilience. It's the strength to be kind when no one is kind to you. It's the patience to wait for someone to see your worth without ever trying to prove it. It's honesty, depth, and compassion. And I missed it, for far too long. I changed after Sarah. Not instantly. But little by little, the world started to look different. I stopped judging people by their faces and started noticing their eyes, the pain they carried, the joy they tried to hide. I started listening more and speaking less. Back then, I thought I had everything figured out: charm, looks, popularity, a well-paying job. I thought success was measured by how many people envied your life, how many heads turned when you entered a room. I didn't realize I was chasing shadows, illusions. Sarah shattered all of that. She didn't yell. She didn't punish me. She just quietly walked away, and in doing so, she left the loudest echo in my soul. She taught me that beauty isn't loud. It doesn't always wear makeup, or designer clothes, or smile at the right time. Real beauty is resilience. It's the strength to be kind when no one is kind to you. It's the patience to wait for someone to see your worth without ever trying to prove it. It's honesty, depth, and compassion. And I missed it, for far too long. I changed after Sarah. Not instantly. But little by little, the world started to look different. I stopped judging people by their faces and started noticing their eyes, the pain they carried, the joy they tried to hide. I started listening more and speaking less. I spent time alone, reading, reflecting, growing. I also distanced myself from the friends who mocked her, the ones who mirrored who I used to be. I couldn't be around them anymore. It hurt too much. Not because of what they did to her, but because I had laughed along once too. I tried to reach out to Sarah, once. I sent her a letter. No expectations, just a thank you. I never heard back, but that's okay. She doesn't owe me anything. In fact, I owe her everything. Because of her, I became someone I can finally respect. Someone I think she might have liked, had I been that person from the start. So here I am now, telling this story not because I want redemption, or pity, or even a second chance. But because I hope someone else out there hears it, someone who might be where I once was, blind in all the wrong ways, and maybe, just maybe, they'll look a little deeper before they turn away. Because what does beauty really mean?